So hi Jeremy, it's brilliant to have you with us today, and we're very keen to find out about the arts and culture strategy you've been working on for Scilly, and the kind of challenges you face in bringing artistic performance to a place like Scilly, which is so unlike all other venues and destinations.
I think the first thing we had to learn was there is a strong and thriving creative community on Scilly, which prides itself on its independence and ingenuity. So we've had to be very sensitive about parachuting in any additional creative activity, and in fact worked very closely with that community to ensure that if we're bringing anyone over, it isn't duplicating or threatening the skills and services they're already providing. So we have about 40 artists living and working on the islands, majority in visual arts. There are some musicians, but what we have been able to do is enhance that for the visitors by bringing over some fairly carefully curated theatre. We normally insist it has got some link to Solonian culture or Celtic culture from Cornwall, and we're fortunate in having a sort of network of providers now across the southwest who, it won't surprise you to know, are very keen to come and share their practice on Scilly. So we've introduced a fortnight in May we call Creative Scilly. Last year we were due to have 60 or 70 events, and unfortunately they had to be postponed. But there are a raft of authors, illustrators, painters, sculptors and performers who are now lined up to come back when it is safe and we're allowed to do that. And I'm really pleased that we've now got 7 theatre companies lined up for 2021, staggered through the season, and that's intended both for local families and particularly local young people who don't get access to the theatre, but also as a bit of a novelty for visitors to come and see some open-air theatre in spaces like this.
And do you think it is a significant factor in attracting a new demographic of visitor to Scilly?
We've definitely learnt a lot from Cornwall, where cultural tourism has become a significant part of the millennial experience. So getting away from the traditional Solonian visitor, who you will know is the sort of empty nester, national truster, hip replacement, mountain warehouse, to bring people who are a bit younger and perhaps looking for something a little bit different, experiential tourism, and the opportunity to perhaps take part in things as well as consume. So yeah, we're looking at all sorts of ways of just enriching that calendar. And we've learnt a bit from Tresco, where they've run some really imaginative residencies in watercolour painting, creative writing, and the idea of bringing groups at the shoulders of the season to come and experience those types of things, I think is a definite potential area for growth.
And there's a well-being element to that, isn't there? It's about a kind of retreat and doing something different, not just going on holiday. It's a different kind of...
Very much so. I mean, the sporting and active side of Scilly is now quite well established with the gig championships and Otelo. I think the wellbeing stuff does overlap, you know, and there is a creative dimension to that with yoga retreats and the idea of coming perhaps to do some writing and other classes and things. So yeah, we've got some colleagues who are looking at that quite closely, which I think, again, you know, attracts a different calibre of visitor, a different type of visitor, and it's a brilliant environment to come and take part in that.
Yeah. And what are the particular challenges of trying to build that new market?
I think capacity is our biggest challenge. We don't at the moment really have spaces that allow us to do things very well. So the church halls and one or two of the community spaces are a little bit neglected and run down, so the visitor experience perhaps isn't as good as it could be. You know, if you compare us with Truro or St Ives, we simply don't have good communal space. So investment is needed there. And the other issue really is around, at the moment, supply and demand. So we have to be looking well into the future, and we also have to be looking at, as I've said, the shoulder seasons. when we can get space to bring people over who maybe do want to try something a bit different. The other issue is making it affordable, because obviously bringing anyone here is expensive, providing travel and accommodation, knowing we've got relatively small audiences and relatively small venues to host events means it's never going to be very cost effective.
Yeah. So those economics questions keep popping up.
They never go away.
Yeah,
There is always this question of scale. And in conversations with the Arts Council, we've had to unashamedly say we can never compete if it's about numbers. We can do quality, we can do inclusion, we can do engagement, but we are always going to struggle if you're measuring our outputs purely in terms of numbers.
And just to round things off then, you just mentioned having a venue. So what's your vision for a new space for Scilly?
Well, perhaps fortunately, the demise of the museum has really focused people's attention on a lack of good wet weather facilities on St Mary's particularly. So it's allowed us to explore a rather more ambitious plan. So rather than simply creating or recreating like for like the museum's footprint, we are looking to incorporate within a sort of visitor centre of some sort a museum with an auditorium. And my vision is to have a small scale venue that could seat perhaps 100 people, that could double up as a community space in the winter months, but would also allow us to host music, live theatre, cinema, lectures in, as I say, a space that is warm, comfortable, accessible, and perhaps meets higher standards of sort of expectation, and allows local residents as well to take part in culture that at the moment they tend to have to experience on the mainland.
That sounds great. Is there anything you would like to know about our students or ask them if they were in front of you now?
I think it'd be really interesting, particularly for first-time visitors coming to Scilly, to know what might make them come back, what is missing, or even perhaps what we're not doing very well. A lot of people like the unexpected on Scilly and say, oh, I wasn't anticipating there would be this here, this happening. There is a lot going on environmentally, there's a lot going on in terms of history and archaeology. Is it hidden? Is it accessible? It would be really good to know perhaps where we could be making more noise and attracting particularly younger visitors. Are we missing a trick? They can tell us.
Great. We'll definitely pass that on and open up for comment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.